I've been seeing this picture make the rounds on Instagram that highlights the two different types of Rolex owners. One is an actual diver, bought his Submariner 40 years ago, he serviced it like twice, bracelet is stretched, and it's the only watch he's ever owned. And then there's the second Rolex owner. I think we all already know this guy. He probably works in finance, he calls his watches assets, and he knows the market price of a Daytona, but couldn't tell you what a chronograph is. These are obviously caricatures, but every good meme contains a little nugget of truth. Rolex has developed an image problem, and I'm not convinced Rolex itself has the power to solve it. It's nothing to do with the product. The watches are great, maybe the best built, most dependable in their price category, but what wearing a Rolex communicates has changed. It is still an extremely powerful status symbol, but for a growing number of enthusiasts, it has stopped being a reliable symbol of taste. And I think this is going to be working to their detriment in the coming years. So welcome back. This is a series we do on the channel where we dissect big watch brands and some of the drawbacks they could be facing in the coming years or even right now. I've known since we started this series that Rolex had to be its whole own episode, but it's a brand I wanted to treat with caution. For one, I am a Rolex person. To my core, I am a lover of Rolex. For two, I am very aware that these are expensive items, so I didn't want to slag off a brand when someone has just spent a lot of money on a watch that they love. I didn't want them to feel any less about that purchase. And for three, there's this emotional switch in people whenever you talk about Rolex. Some people get venomous, some people get really defensive. I don't know. I'm gonna be as objective as I possibly can be, try to look at the whole picture, and hopefully communicate well the big problems I think Rolex is facing. I am being selective on my wording here. I think Rolex is more recognizable and culturally dominant than ever before, and for that reason, I think there's a cool factor that has been lost. Let's overthink it. The Rolex Submariner was introduced in the 1950s as a piece of professional equipment. It wasn't pretending to be a dive watch, it was an industry-leading diving instrument that has been a hugely important part in creating this genre of watch. And I think this is also a part of the allure. They were worn by interesting people doing cool things, and Rolex's advertising reinforced that. They were worn by explorers, divers, pilots, race car drivers, and scientists. I think this is something modern Rolex has kept as well. Like, as of the time of filming, if you go onto the Rolex website, the first thing you see is their newest ambassador, Paul Nicklin, who is a conservation photographer. Their ambassadors are sometimes really obscure environmental scientists. I find it so charming. But there has been an undeniable dramatic change in their positioning. For example, a no-date Submariner cost approximately $225 in 1967, roughly $2,000 to $2,300 in today's money. The current retail price for a no-date sub is $10,050 USD. It's not a perfect apples-to-apples comparison. The modern Rolex has much better materials, sapphire glass, ceramic, a considerably better bracelet and clasp, improved water resistance, and a modern movement. But I think it still illustrates something. Rolex didn't merely improve the Submariner, they repositioned it. Most people watching will already know this, but there was a massive philosophical change in the 1980s. The mechanical watch industry was devastated by quartz, and they could no longer compete purely on creating an accurate, practical way to tell the time. So, the surviving remnants of the Swiss watch industry began repositioning mechanical watches as luxury objects. One of the best examples here, the stainless steel sub-date. It was $230 in the early 1970s and shot up to $1,325 by the 1980s. The next big jump happened in 2012 with the introduction of ceramic, so fair play, and the reference 114060 at $7,100. Let's stop talking about money. I know it's boring. I'm sorry. I'm just using it to highlight that I think it is so much more than just upgrading materials and creating better watches. I think it is a repositioning from pieces of equipment to prestigious luxury objects styled as professional equipment. I have been thinking about this so much. Rolex is the great contradiction. They feel impossible to buy and like you'll never get one, and yet they're all over Chrono 24. They're incredibly common. The Morgan Stanley and Lux Consult Swiss Watch Report estimates that Rolex released about 1.15 million watches in 2025, slightly less than the previous year, but still enormous by the standards of the Swiss watchmaking industry. 1 million watches per year might not sound like a crazy amount when compared to something like consumer electronics or something like that, but watches remain in circulation for decades. Those watches don't disappear. They are sold, inherited, traded. So even if Rolex can restrict the supply of new watches, it can't control the millions already outside of its network. We won't get into the Rolex CPO program here. That's a whole different can of worms. I saw a figure recently on a secondary platform. I can't remember which secondary platform, but hopefully editing Brittany can put it in here. But Rolex represented 36% of all sales in this secondary platform. 9 out of 10 of the most searched references were Rolex. This is insane commercial dominance, but that dominance comes with a price. It comes with a side effect. When something becomes so big that it's the obvious choice, it loses its taste factor. There's always a coolness that is lost with something when it becomes a part of pop culture. Like, it's not cool to like Drake, even though tons of people obviously really like him and listen to him. No one wants to admit that they like Drake, and Rolex has kind of become that. People who love hip-hop want something more deep-cut, emerging, the next sound. In the same way watch collectors and enthusiasts are more drawn to Habring, Laurent Ferrier, Otsuka Low-Tech. Okay, this next part is going to sound really snobby, and I don't want it to, but I know it's going to. But I think it's a gross reality in the mentality of luxury. Rolex tightly controls its authorized distribution, but it can't control its cultural distribution, if that makes sense. They can't decide who wears a Daytona after it enters the secondary market. This is something we've seen happen in other spheres. The biggest examples I can think of are Burberry and Stone Island here in the UK. It's happening right now with Hermes and the Birkin bag being taken over by influencers. It sounds gross leaving my mouth. I hate saying all these words, but I also know for a fact that this is the way the big luxury purchasers think. Like the big whale customers. These are the things that cause them to move away from certain brands and towards other brands. I think this is a huge contributing factor in the rise of indies. I'm thinking of Debatoon, Laurent Ferrier, MB&F, FP Journe. I think this might be the most damaging part of this whole story. For decades, Rolex served as an aspirational watch. You saved your money and eventually bought the Rolex you always wanted for a special life milestone. Those customers, if they walked into a Rolex authorized dealer in these past few years, would have been made to feel so small. There would be no stock. They'd have to join a transparent queue we all know as the waiting list. And no one really knows the time frames. There's no accurate timeline for when that watch would come. This has never happened to me, but I've heard it from enough reliable people that it must be true. But you would maybe even be encouraged to build a relationship with the brand by buying lots of jewelry in advance, and then you'd be considered to buy a Rolex. Once again, not every authorized dealer behaves like this. I shop at the Goldsmiths in Bristol, Cabot Circus, and the Cribs Causeway. I've never seen this happen. It's not happened to me. They're stand-up people, just trying their best. Lovely people. But I think the mythology around the waitlist and the bad taste it left in people's mouths hurt their brand perception. I think a good chunk of people who hate Rolex now don't hate the physical object or the watches themselves. It's the experience they had. They weren't flippers trying to make money. They were knowledgeable, passionate people who spent years aspiring for something. The very customer base the brand should want, that should feel encouraged, and they were made to feel inadequate. That will foster some resentment. And on top of that, they're not the only brand making good watches. Why beg someone to take your hard-earned money when you could easily go buy a Jaeger-LeCoultre, Grand Seiko, Zenith, Chopard? I'm going to keep this segment short. I talk about this all the time. Nobody wants to hear me talk about it some more. But the conversation surrounding Rolex became unbearable. People asking, oh, how much did you pay? Did you get it at retail? Are you going to flip it? Getting dream watches became less about the watches themselves and people being excited about it, and more about winning a transaction. I really dislike this. It has made me talk about the watches I love less and even wear them less. And this kind of brings us back full circle, back to the meme that started this video and the two competing identities of Rolex purchasers. The old Rolex, tool, robust, well-lived, a scratched and faded bezel worn by the original buyer, and the contemporary caricature, the watch bought to appear successful. I think Rolex's big problem is an image problem. The brand's history communicates one thing, and the modern audience communicates another. I don't know. maybe I'm being really snobby. I know people are allowed to buy whatever watches they like for whatever reasons they like. I just think that's the problem Rolex is facing. My final thoughts on this one would be Rolex is not declining. Obviously, they're not a brand in decline. Commercially, it is overwhelmingly dominant. They account for a third of Swiss watch sales by value and dominate the secondary market. This isn't a story about Rolex failing, but succeeding so hard that the meaning of their product has changed for better or worse. I will forever love them. I will forever have the image of 1950s divers and Pan Am pilots in my head. I'll forever be seeing conservation photographers and the guardian of the ocean. I just think maybe that's what less people are seeing and more people seeing the status symbol side. Maybe that's an unfair assessment. Maybe that's exactly what you're thinking. I don't know. Let me know all of your thoughts in the comments down below. Does Rolex have a problem at all? Has your perception of the brand changed? Let me know. Hello, Popter patrons! Here we are, new office. I'm trying a zoomy outy thing. Hopefully it looks good. Maybe it looks weird. I don't know, but we're discovering things. We're learning things as we go. Guys, the whole reason this channel runs is because you guys support the work here. Thank you so much. Whatever tier of patron you are, you keep this channel alive and going, and I hope you keep enjoying the work we do here. I love making it. I have the best job ever. Thank you for making that possible. You guys rock, you're the best, and we'll see you in the next one.